forum. Jennifer, are you there? She's trying to get you.
Yeah, we like that. I'm really on your last.
Try to get a proper notice. Any area you lacking, Jeff?
We have a quorum now, we're just waiting for Joe.
Joe's going to call in. Joe and Tracy are calling in. If we could just stand by for another couple of minutes, Joe and Tracy are going to join us.
And a holding pattern.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Like ships waiting in the Suez Canal, you know?
yeah, that's right.
Hello?
Joe, you're there.
Yeah, sir.
All right, so, hey, Joe, as we talked about the other day, so we'll start with the audit committee to review the audit,
Okay.
and then we'll call the regular meeting to order. We need the committee to make a recommendation on the 2020 audit. So that's where we'll start.
Okay. So I need to, accept the audit, and that's what we need first?
Yeah, I can just convene the committee, and then I'll explain kind of what everyone has in front of them.
I'm just going through my computer to see if I've got the document.
So for those of you looking at your package on the screen, if you look at page 11 and 12, that's the management letter from Cusack and Company. They performed the audit in February. They provided us with a clean, unqualified audit. There's no findings. There's no discrepancies. On your screen, if you go to page 20, that's where the bonds are listed, the existing bonds that the agency issued. You know, overall, the position of the agency is fine. Recall that 2019 was a very robust year for fees, so the cash position is still excellent. Not too much in the way of expenditures during the course of the year, totaling $54,000. So everything's in order on the financial side of it. There were no a couple of other letters that Cusack provides on page 21. There's no deficiencies in internal controls, and page 23 shows that our investment guidelines are adequate and followed. So unless there's any questions on this, then we're looking to get a recommendation to the board to adopt the 2020 audit.
Okay, I'll move it up.
Second. I'm sorry.
All in favor? And next up, we have, I'm looking at documents, I'm sorry, I had a family crisis this morning, so I'm sorry about it. I'm trying to figure out where the documents are on my computer. What do I pull up?
We can kind of help you, Joe. The next item on the agenda is to call the meeting to order and ask for approval of the minutes.
Okay. I call the meeting to order. Can I have a motion to approve minutes from the previous meeting?
Thank you.
Any second?
Joe, we need the treasurer's report to be reviewed and adopted.
And could I have the treasurer's report, please?
So that's on page 4 and 5 of your packet. You'll see there hasn't been much activity year to date through the end of February. We have some legal expenses in the audit fee, of course. So there's been expenditures of $5,700. We also paid a fee for the WCA project. That's the cost benefit analysis that's required by state law. So our cash on hand at the end of February is $311,693. Questions, I could answer them, or Maureen can answer as well.
Are there any questions on the treasurer's report? So motion to accept the report. So move second.
Second, Tracy.
In favor?
Next up, Joe, we have the consent agenda, which is a group of compliance items that Jamie can summarize.
Right. So as we talked about the other day, Joe, we're kind of grouping all of these activities together so that we can move through it expeditiously. So it is the approval of the audit, and then we have our policy compliance issues that are required every year. The policies are unchanged. Nothing has changed on them. Everything gets filed on our website, on the agency website, and as well as filed with the authority's budget office. Just a couple of the highlights. There is the 2019 performance report, which shows that of all the projects we have in our portfolio, there were 2,515 new jobs. That's 29 fewer than the prior year, but that's because several projects have now dropped off. They've completed their pilots, so they're no longer reporting. And then also it's worth noting that pilot payments to the city, the county, and Schenectady City School District are rising again. This has been happening each year, which is a great sign for the pilot program. That we're increasing the tax base in the city. The investment report is prepared by Cusack and Company, so it just shows that everything is ordered in terms of monies that are in our accounts. And the property report shows that the agency owns 3 properties. The last item is the annual meeting, the election of officers. We're maintaining the positions that have been established over the last couple of years, and we thank you all for volunteering and serving the community.
And could I have a motion to accept that? Report, Cohen. Second, please. Second. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Next up, Joe, is an item related to Technology Drive environmental review that I can cover if you're good with that.
Oh, yes.
So you all know if you go up Maxon Road, right near the Gazette offices, there's Technology Drive. There was a business park that the city IDA was involved with creating back in the 90s under a previous manager and city administration. They built out a business park that's actually been fairly successful on Technology Drive. They built it at the site of a former tank farm. There was large tanks on this site that stored oil for Sousa. If you're an old timer like me, remember that name. They were an oil and gas distributor. Later, they were purchased by Getty, and the terminal shut down, and the IDA was involved in developing about 20 acres there for a business park, and there are quite a few successful companies on that corridor. The problem with the project, as with many of the projects that were undertaken by the IDA leadership at that time, was there was really very little documentation of the environmental record of the site or the cleanup of the site. Moving ahead, if you asked me to produce all the environmental records, say for the goal of headquarters and the cleanup of the Big End site, we could produce that in a minute. if you ask us for the environmental records and the cleanup program at the Alco site where we build Mohawk Harbor, we could produce that within minutes. There really was no documentation. The previous IDA administrator, Mr. Robertson, who's no longer with us, was a very sloppy and poor administrator and basically incompetent. And we continue to clean up the messes that he caused. Well, on Technology Drive, we now have some of the companies turning over. We have a software company at 2165 Technology Drive. They wanted to sell their building, relocate their employees to downtown, and we had a very prominent national company called LS Power that wanted to buy the building and set up a control center there. But when they started doing their due diligence, the company executives could not get comfortable with the environmental history of the site because of the lack of documentation. And so the company withdrew its purchase offer, which is very unfortunate because they're a very large and established player in the power industry, and it would have been a great company to bring to Schenectady. So we've stepped back, and we're asking the IDA to approve funding today, not to exceed 10,000. We think it'll be less, so we're probably in the neighborhood of 5, to bring in one of the leading environmental attorneys in the state, a gentleman named Gary Bowich with Bowich and Coffee, and he's going to review all of their environmental records, obtain the needed records from DEC, and really prepare the building at 2165 Technology Drive for future sale, but also to protect our investment and help all the other companies that are on Technology Drive that are very important to our community. So we're basically going to go back and recreate the environmental due diligence and documentation that should have been available all along. And we've worked with Mr. Bowich in the past. He's extremely good. He's one of the top environmental lawyers in the state, one of the top 2 or 3. And so this is very important. We lost the deal because of the IDA's failure back in the 90s to properly document the site. We need to go back and do that at a modest cost, and that'll put us in good stead for more deal flow and more jobs at Technology Drive. You don't build a business park on an old oil tank farm, and you need to, if you do that, you need to document the environmental records, and that unfortunately was not done. So this is a very modest expenditure. The IDA has a very robust treasury right now, over $300,000. We congratulate Jamie and Maureen for the clean audit and for the good level of our bank account, and we really ask the IDA members to approve this modest expenditure so we can keep the progress going on Tech Drive.
Okay, what number resolution is that?
607 and 21.
Lucy, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Yes.
So this, I think this is a really good resolution and money well spent. I'm just wondering, is it just for that building, or will it be for the whole site?
It's a really good question. Yeah, it's really the whole site. I mean, we're going back and reconstructing it. Where was the various oil tanks located? What was the level of cleanup that was done? Who owned what property? There's a property there that's called the Faro property that was purchased by the IDA, and apparently there had been some dumping on that site. People had dumped garbage and debris and things there. So that property probably shouldn't have been included in the original project, but it was. So we've got to go back and exactly kind of lay out all the different parcels on Tech Drive on both sides and figure out what the proper environmental remediation was done, if any additional remediation needs to be done, if any additional testing needs to be done, et cetera. So it's a comprehensive look at that entire border.
So if more remediation needs to be done, then that comes back and we talk about.
Well, yeah, that would be the responsibility of the property owners. But we just felt this is something that IDA needed to do because it wasn't done correctly when the park was built.
Right, so we're helping out anyone who wants to do for move in the future.
Exactly, and we have deal flow in that corridor. We have a lot of good companies on that corridor. If you haven't been down there, I'd encourage you to drive down there. And it's a little bit out of the way, but there are a lot of nice companies there. It's a very successful project actually but the environmental due diligence was not done correctly.
Well, we'll make the lender happy for sure, we have that.
Exactly, that's another key point, is that people aren't gonna do a bank loan without the environmental.
Right. Thank you.
Could I have a motion?
Joe, you're starting to fade out on us a little bit. You want to call a question again? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to call the question. Could I have a motion to accept 60721?
Yeah,
You have a question, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, so if the lawyer finds that there is something wrong, and remedying it, or is it 100% property owner?
It's their responsibility. They own the property, they bought it. We're trying to come up with the right approach for the entire corridor and document, the work that was done and the prior environmental record. Basically assemble the environmental record for the site, for the sites. It's not, though, we're not looking to take on any liabilities for the IDA. I think that's a very good point.
Any other questions? Comments? Any other questions or comments? Could I have a motion to accept 60721?
this is Peggy, I'll do that.
Okay, second.
Lucy, I'll second that.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's passed. Okay, number 608-21.
So you may recall last year, the IDA retained Bardstead Enterprises to work on some of the property that the IDA owns. I mentioned that there are three properties. So along Technology Drive that we just talked about, there's about a quarter-mile strip of grassy area that we maintain to keep it looking neat and tidy. The IDA also owns the Duane Avenue parking lot, and it's a very large lot with a lot of grass area around it. So it's mostly just mowing, but litter pickup, any trash, or if there's any other debris, it gets picked up. The mowing gets done twice every month through the summer, and then there's some miscellaneous work that also takes place. So the resolution calls for retaining Bardstead for $5,000 a month for the next 6 months, May through October.
Any questions? Comments about this? Could I have a motion then? 608-21. Second.
Tracy said,
Second. All in favor?
aye.
Number 6, any other business, Jamie?
No, it's good, great article in the Gazette today. We toured them through the redeveloped St. Mary's School, and that came out beautifully, and a very successful project. I want to thank David with the land bank who's here at the meeting for all his hard work on that project. I was skeptical that we'd ever see that school redeveloped. It had been vacant since the 80s, but it was another great successful project. And as we come out of COVID, we continue to do projects and try to move the community forward. So a lot of good activity in the paper lately. We've been issuing a lot of updates and thank the IDA for their service.
Where did I hear? I heard on the radio yesterday, radio. They were talking about Eastern Avenue and the school and.
Yeah, the mayor was highlighting the progress at Eastern. He was doing one of his homes events where he was promoting the sale of a two-family house right near Elmer Avenue School, and then went on to note that the Elmer Avenue School is going to be converted into housing. St. Mary's has been converted successfully. The Renaissance Square project on Eastern, the new construction, some of the other work that's been done. So it got some good coverage. And if you drive down Eastern, you see it's changing. It's difficult. It takes a long time, but it is slowly changing to a positive situation.
Was that on the, what did they, I think I must have heard in the car. I was just saying that if people can hear that, if they run it, it was really well done.
Yeah, we'll try to find the clip. I think it was, I heard it was on Channel 13, but it got some good coverage. There's a great article about the restoration of St. Mary's. You know, one of the points that we like to make is that there are historic. Sound good. Everybody okay?
Yeah, I've got things going on.
Okay. But, you know, there are historic buildings other than in the stockade in downtown. There's some, maybe somebody could put mute. Anyway, check out the Gazette story on the St. Mary's School today. It's great.
What, is the idea about the clearing up the, across from, Mike's hot dog? Is that cleaned up, is that sold, that property?
It has been cleaned up, and it's ready for development, shovel ready. We were not involved in that. A private developer bought it from the city and has demolished and prepped the site. And behind the site is I was out there this week. It's funny that you asked. The railroad really needs to clean up their area. It's disgraceful. But that site is being marketed very successfully. They have some strong interest in that site right now.
Good. Any other business? Sounds like we're in the middle of a waterfall or a shower. Could I have a motion for the meeting? So, this is Doug. Second. Second. Thank you. All in favor? Sorry.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you.